They say love is blind. But what if love isn't just blind? It's also gold digging. Imagine being one of the richest men in the world, a prince bathed in luxury, with gold-plated everything, a palace that makes five-star hotels look like cheap motels, and an army of servants ready to fulfill your every command before you even think it. Sounds perfect, right? But for our prince, perfection was the problem. You see, when you have unlimited riches, how do you know if anyone truly loves you? And not just your money. Every woman who fluttered her eyelashes at him, every beauty who whispered sweet words in his ear, every elegant lady who paraded through his grand halls. Were they drawn to his heart or just his kingdom? It was a question that haunted him, nagging at the back of his mind every time someone professed their love. And let's be real, who wouldn't want to be a princess? A life of diamonds and silk, of royal feasts and private islands. But our prince wanted more. He wanted something real. He wanted someone who would look past the gold, past the title, past the silk robes, and see him. Not Prince Rashid, not the heir to an empire, not the man with a fleet of Rolls Royces, but just a man, just Rashid. But let's be honest, finding true love when you're draped in wealth is like trying to see who really likes you at a dinner party when you're the one paying the bill. So the prince did something absolutely insane, something no other royal in their right mind would ever consider. He vanished. Not really vanished, but let's just say the royal tailor had the shock of his life when the prince walked in one morning and said, "Make me look like I haven't seen a bathtub in a year." Gone were the silk robes, the embroidered vests, the custom Italian shoes. Instead, he dressed in rags, smudged dirt on his face, and stepped out of his golden palace into the real world. The streets, the markets, the places where no one bowed at his feet. And oh, the things he saw. People pushing past him without a second glance. Merchants turning up their noses. Women who once showered him with attention, suddenly acting as if he were invisible. One day the most desirable bachelor in the kingdom, the next just another beggar in the crowd. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because as he wandered the streets, hungry for something more than food, hungry for connection, for something real, he met someone. Someone who didn't care about his riches, because as far as she knew, he had none. And what happened next was beyond even his wildest imagination. Now let's get one thing straight. Our prince wasn't just playing dress-up. This wasn't some royal prank or a weekend adventure. No, no, no. This was real. He was about to step into a world he had only seen from his palace balcony, a world where people weren't showered in riches but struggled to make it through the day. And let me tell you, the moment he walked out of the palace gates, looking like he had lost a fight with a sandstorm, reality hit him harder than a camel's kick. The sun, merciless. The people, brutally honest. The hunger, oh, he felt it. Because guess what? When you're a prince, meals appear before you like magic. But when you're a nobody, suddenly that juicy lamb roast and golden rice don't come rolling in on a silver tray. No one bowed. No one offered him a drink. No one whispered his name in admiration. Instead, shopkeepers waved him away, muttering about another beggar, and well-dressed men looked through him like he was invisible. But here's the thing. This was exactly what he needed. For the first time in his life, he wasn't a prince. He wasn't special. He wasn't anyone. He was just another man on the street, struggling to be seen, struggling to be heard. And let me tell you, when a man used to endless luxury suddenly has to earn a kind glance, that's a reality check that no royal education can prepare you for. And just when he thought he had seen it all, just when he thought he had hit the lowest point, she appeared. A woman. Not a princess draped in silk, not a royal desperate to secure a crown, no jewels, no servants, just a simple, radiant soul with eyes that saw him, not his status. And here's where the story really begins. Now let's talk about her. She wasn't the kind of woman you'd find at royal banquets, dressed in gowns worth more than a small village. She wasn't dripping in diamonds or batting her eyelashes, hoping to catch a prince's attention. No, she was something else entirely. She was real. A woman of simple means, but a heart richer than any treasure in his palace. Maybe she was a market vendor, selling fresh bread with flour dust on her hands. Maybe she was a servant, working tirelessly with no expectation of glory. Or maybe she was just someone who knew what struggle really felt like, because unlike him, she had lived it every single day. And while others brushed past him like he was nothing more than a shadow, she stopped. Imagine this, our prince sitting in the corner of a bustling street, hungry, exhausted, his pride hanging by a thread. And then, a voice. Are you hungry? Not pitying, not mocking, just kind. And before he could even answer, she was handing him a piece of warm bread, the kind that smelled like home, like comfort, like everything he had taken for granted. Now let's be real for a second. The prince had been surrounded by women who would have fainted at the idea of speaking to a beggar. Women who spent fortunes on perfumes, but wouldn't dare step into a crowded marketplace. And yet, here was this woman giving away food to someone she thought had nothing. And in that moment, something inside him shifted, because for the first time in his life, he had met someone who wasn't impressed by his title, because she didn't even know he had one. And as he looked at her, really looked at her, he realized that this wasn't just kindness. This was something rare, something precious, something he couldn't afford to lose. But here's where things get really interesting. Because the more time he spent with her, the more he realized that he wasn't just testing her, he was falling for her. And that was a problem. Because what happens when a prince, disguised as a beggar, falls in love with a woman who has no idea who he really is? Well, let's just say, secrets like these don't stay hidden forever. Now let me tell you something about love. It doesn't come wrapped in gold. It doesn't care about royal bloodlines or silk robes. It sneaks up on you, unexpected, uninvited, and before you know it, bam, you're thinking about someone day and night, wondering what they're doing, replaying their laughter in your head like it's your favorite song. And that's exactly what happened to our prince. At first, he told himself it was just curiosity, just a simple fascination with this woman who saw him as an equal. Not a ruler, not a prize, not a man worth bowing to. But as the days turned into weeks and their conversations stretched from sunrise to sunset, something deeper started to bloom. They talked about life, about dreams, about things no one had ever dared to say to a prince. She wasn't afraid to challenge him, to question the way the world worked, to laugh at things most people whispered about in fear. And oh, that laugh. It wasn't the practiced, delicate giggle of noble women trying to impress a man. No, hers was real. It was wild. It was the kind of laugh that made him laugh, even when he wasn't supposed to. But here's where things got dangerous. Because the more time he spent with her, the more he realized that this wasn't just a game anymore. He wasn't just pretending to be a beggar to test if someone would love him without riches. He was falling in love. Hard. But here was the problem. He wasn't who she thought he was. And with every passing day, every stolen moment, every whispered conversation under the stars, the guilt started creeping in. What would she do when she found out? When she realized the man she thought was struggling to survive was actually the Prince Rashid, ruler of a kingdom, owner of palaces, a man with wealth beyond imagination? Would she hate him for lying? Would she feel betrayed? Would she think, like every other woman before her, that he was nothing more than a prize to be won? And yet, he couldn't bring himself to tell her. Not yet. Not when she was the only person who had ever seen him, not the prince, not the ruler, not the heir to a throne. Just him. But secrets? Oh, they have a way of unraveling. And when this one comes out, it's going to change everything. But before we dive into the moment that will change everything, let me ask you, what would you do? Imagine falling in love with someone, believing they're just an ordinary person, only to find out they're a literal prince. Would you feel betrayed, shocked, or would you see it as the ultimate fairy tale? Well, our prince was about to find out. Because secrets, they don't stay buried forever. And his was about to explode in spectacular fashion. Now he had planned to tell her. He really did. He had rehearsed the moment 1,000 times in his head. He wanted to sit her down, look into her eyes and say, I need to tell you something. I'm not who you think I am. But life, oh, it had other plans. Because before he could confess, someone else did it for him. One moment, they were together, laughing under the warm glow of the market lanterns. And the next, a royal guard, one of his, stormed in, dropping to his knees and saying the one thing that shattered everything. Your Highness, we've been searching for you. Silence, the kind of silence that makes your heart stop, the kind that feels louder than 1,000 voices. And then, her eyes. Wide, stunned, betrayed, because in that single moment, everything she thought she knew about him, everything she trusted, was gone. She didn't say a word. She just stared at him, as if she was looking at a stranger. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying. It wasn't just that she knew now. It was that she was already pulling away. Because for the first time in her life, she felt like she had been played. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because unlike every other woman before her, she didn't gasp in excitement. She didn't fawn over his title. She didn't throw herself into his arms, eager to be a princess. Number two, she turned away. She walked off, and she left him standing there, the most powerful man in the kingdom, completely powerless to stop her. Now the question is, can he win her back? Or did his search for true love just cost him the only woman who ever really loved him? Now let me just say, this was not the fairy tale ending our prince had imagined. He thought once the truth was out, everything would fall into place. Maybe she'd be a little upset. Maybe she'd need time to process. But no, she didn't give him that luxury. Instead, she left. And here he was, a prince, used to getting whatever he wanted with a wave of his hand. Wealth, power, admiration. These things had always been at his command. But love, true, pure love, that was something he had to work for. And he had never ever worked so hard in his life. Days turned into weeks, and our prince didn't just sit in his golden palace sulking. Oh no, he went searching for her. And not as the prince, not as the man with the kingdom at his feet. No, no. He went looking for her as Rashid, the man she had once known. A man who had lied, yes, but who had also shown her kindness. A man who loved her for who she truly was. He searched high and low, through every marketplace, every street corner, asking anyone if they had seen a woman with dark eyes and an unwavering smile. But no one had seen her. She had vanished. Until one day, there she was. She wasn't in a palace, wasn't surrounded by jewels, she wasn't dressed in fine silk. No, she was standing in a humble soup kitchen, serving food to those in need. The same kind of work she had always done, always with the same selflessness and grace. And at that moment, something clicked. Not just in the prince's heart, but in hers. Because when she saw him, standing there like a common man, no royal guards, no grand entourage, just Rashid, just him, something inside her shifted. It wasn't about his title anymore. It wasn't about wealth, power, or luxury. It was about what he had done, what he had become. She had always known he had a good heart, but now, standing in front of her, without the trappings of a kingdom, he had proven it. He wasn't the man who wore a crown. He wasn't the man who ruled with an iron fist. He was the man who had felt hunger, who had been humbled, who had searched for love in the only place it could be found, in her heart. And there, in that quiet moment, she made her choice. She took a step forward, looked him in the eyes and said, "You came here for me, not for what I could give you, but because you saw me. You saw who I really am." And my friends, that's when he knew. She hadn't just fallen for the prince. She had fallen for the man. So what happened next? Well, it wasn't a grand royal wedding with 1,000 guests and a sea of gold. No, their wedding was simple, beautiful, and filled with the kind of love that had nothing to do with palaces and everything to do with the heart. But there's more. The prince didn't just marry her and move on. No, no. He vowed to use his wealth to do real good. Together they built schools, hospitals, and homes for the poor. Together they helped lift people out of poverty and showed the world that the richest treasures aren't found in gold. They're found in love and kindness. And they ruled not from a throne, but from the hearts of their people. The prince had gone searching for true love, and what he found was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. It wasn't just love, it was purpose. And that, my friends, is the most unbelievable part of all. Now listen, fairy tales love to end right where the prince wins the girl, the wedding bells ring, and boom, happily ever after. But let's be real. Life? Life is never that simple. Because even though she had seen him for who he truly was, even though she had felt the depth of his love, doubt still lingered. Not in his heart. Number Rashid was ready to give her the world, to make her his queen, to show her that she wasn't just a lucky woman who stumbled into a royal love story. She was the woman he had chosen above all else. But in her heart, there was still something unspoken. Because love is one thing, but trust, that's a whole different story. And so, even though she had stepped toward him, even though she had seen him humbled, stripped of his riches, walking the streets like an ordinary man, she still wasn't sure. "Tell me something," she said, looking him in the eye. "If I say no, if I say I can't marry you, will you still love me?" The question hit him like a dagger, because of course he would still love her. Didn't she see that? Didn't she understand that he had risked everything, abandoned his comforts, stripped himself of his identity just to find her? But then, in that moment, he realized this wasn't just a test for him. This was her test too, because she had spent her whole life watching people with power take what they wanted, watching men with money assume that love was theirs for the buying. She had seen promises come and go, seen people change when faced with temptation. She needed to know that his love wasn't just about the chase, that it wasn't about proving a point or winning a game. She needed to know that if she walked away, he would still hold her heart with the same care. So he did something he had never done before. He let go. "If you say no," he said, voice steady, "I will still love you, I will still respect you, and I will never force you to be something you're not. Because love," he swallowed hard, "love isn't a crown to be worn, it's a choice, and I will always choose you, even if you don't choose me." Silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than words. And then she smiled, not just any smile, not the polite, reserved smile of a woman playing along with a fairy tale. Number, this was the smile of a woman who had finally heard what she needed to hear. Because love that demands isn't love. Love that pressures isn't love. But love that waits, love that trusts, that is the rarest treasure of all. And in that moment, she chose him back. Now, a royal wedding was inevitable. The people demanded it. After all, a prince who went missing, disguised himself as a beggar, and returned with the love of his life? That was a story. And oh, did the kingdom talk. Some noblewomen scoffed. "A servant? A commoner? How could she be worthy of a prince?" They whispered behind silk fans. The advisors worried. The people may not accept her. The court may resist. The royal bloodline must be preserved. But the prince did not care. Because for the first time in his life, he understood what real wealth was. And on the day of their wedding, when he took her hand in his, he didn't see a commoner. He didn't see a woman of lower birth. He saw the strongest person he had ever met. A woman who had looked royalty in the eye and dared to demand honesty. A woman who had walked away from a throne until she was sure the man sitting on it was worthy of her. And when she said, "I do," it wasn't because she was marrying a prince. It was because she was marrying Rashid. The man, not the title, not the crown, just him. But here's where the story takes an even wilder turn. Because most kings and queens rule from their thrones. They wear their crowns, they sign their decrees, and they keep their distance from the people. But not them. Together, they built something bigger than a love story. They used their power to change lives, to build schools in villages where children had never held a book, to create hospitals where the sick were treated with dignity, no matter their wealth, to lift people out of poverty, not with coins tossed from a balcony, but with real lasting change. Because he had felt hunger, he had seen struggle, he had lived in the shadows of his own kingdom, and he never forgot. They ruled with compassion, with justice, with the understanding that true leadership isn't about power, it's about service. And the people? Oh, they loved her. Not because she was their queen, but because she had once been one of them. And that, my friends, is what made her the greatest queen the kingdom had ever known. Now let's pause for a second, because this isn't just a story about a prince finding love. This is about something bigger. It's about the fact that real love isn't found in riches or titles. It's found in truth, in being seen for who you are, not what you own. It's about knowing that the right person will love you for you, not for what you can give them. And maybe, just maybe, it's about realizing that sometimes losing everything you thought mattered is the only way to find what truly does. So tell me, if you were in her shoes, if you found out the man you loved was really a prince, would you have walked away? Would you have trusted his heart? Or would you have been blinded by the gold? Because in the end, it's never about what someone has. It's about who they are. And that's the most unbelievable treasure of all.